Having employment and job opportunities is important in rural areas. Sometimes there's not enough places that stay open in small towns. So if there's opportunities for jobs, I graduated from high school from the last class of Willow Community High School. It has now closed and been closed since I graduated. And for many summers while I was in college, I worked for my parents' business in Washita. I then obtained my undergraduate degree from Iowa State University in Ames. And then I went on to attend law school. For the last 27 years, I have worked as an attorney. For the first 3 years out of law school, I worked at a large corporate law firm in Chicago doing corporate litigation. However, I soon discovered that corporate law was not my passion, and so I moved on to other opportunities. In 2002, I returned to Iowa and settled in Woodbury County, and I began my career in public service. And I began working as a prosecutor in the Woodbury County Attorney's Office. And for most of the last 24 years, I have been a prosecutor. And I took that job so I could help protect the public and improve the lives of children. I have prosecuted drug dealers and sex offenders and other criminals, but I specialize in cases involving victims of child abuse. While I have worked for Woodbury County, I've been an AFSCME union member for over 20 years. And also, while living in Woodbury County, I became very active in my community. I previously served as a high school coach and a church elder, and have served on several nonprofit boards. I spent 14 years as the legal counsel for the Community Action Agency of Siouxland that oversees the Head Start and Early Head Start programs. I also currently am the vice president of New Perspectives, an organization that provides services to individuals with intellectual disability, including day hab services and community employment opportunities. And I'm also currently the president of the Siouxland Council on Child Abuse and Neglect, and we oversee grant funding to local nonprofits to help prevent child abuse. I've established myself as a leader in 2012 and again in 2014. I was elected to serve in the Iowa House to 2 terms. And while serving in the legislature, I decided to run my own law practice so I would have the flexibility to serve in Des Moines. And while I was in private practice, I worked primarily on behalf of children and families in family law cases, but I also worked as an indigent defense attorney, taking court appointed cases for individuals who couldn't otherwise afford to have an attorney appointed to represent them. While I've been an attorney, I have had the privilege of arguing and winning 2 cases before the Iowa Supreme Court. One case is while I was a prosecutor, I argued to ensure equal protection for children. And another case, while I was in private practice, I represented a parent who was struggling with substance abuse issues and worked to ensure adequate time for her to get the services needed so she could be reunified with her children. While serving the legislature, we worked cooperatively and achieved some great bipartisan legislation. We cut property taxes in 2013, including on large businesses and small businesses in Iowa. We made healthcare more accessible by passing the Medicaid expansion that expanded healthcare coverage to over 150,000 Iowans who were not previously covered. 2 projects that were very close to home for me was one expanding the mental health treatment options for children, and the other was strengthening criminal sentencing laws. A constituent of mine had come to me about the lack of mental health services in our community at that time, back in 2015. Neither of our hospitals at St. Luke's or at Mercy, Woodbury is the largest county in the 4th Congressional District, that at neither of our 2 hospitals did they have children's behavioral health units. So on the committal cases that I was dealing with in court, we were sending children out of state to Sioux Falls and Omaha, hours away from their parents and family. And the best way to receive mental health services is locally so that your family can have involvement in your treatment planning and getting better. So the former executive director for Jackson Recovery Centers, it came to me and we worked together to open a crisis mental health stabilization unit by passing some legislation that allowed that to occur as one of the units at the inpatient substance abuse treatment that they had in Sioux City at that time. So they had an inpatient bed for treatment of substance abuse issues, but this allowed crisis mental health stabilization. And that reduced court costs because there were less court cases. Because if you had insurance or Medicaid, you could access that service without a court committal. Otherwise, we were having to continue to court commit children to Cherokee Mental Health Institute, which at that time had children's beds. Since that time, Unfortunately, Governor Reynolds chose to close the beds at Cherokee MHI. Now, Independence is the only place in the state of Iowa that has mental health inpatient facilities for children in the state of Iowa. And unfortunately, Jackson Recovery Centers was bought out by Rosecrans, a company from Illinois, and they have closed the mental health crisis stabilization unit, and it's no longer available in Woodbury County. So we're back to sending kids out of state. And oftentimes our ERs are overrun with children waiting for days for beds because nowhere in the state of Iowa has an opportunity for kids to go anywhere. And so we need to do better for our mental health services in the state. We currently rank 49th in the number of inpatient beds out of all 50 states. Another bill that I worked on was strengthening sentencing laws in the state of Iowa. I had a constituent that came to me, and very tragic situation. A child in her family tragically had died as a result of the acts of a caretaker. At that time, the crime of child endangerment resulting in the death of a child did not have a mandatory minimum like the crimes of attempted murder or murder. And I thought that was unfair, and I agreed with her that there should be at least some minimum time that is required when a child has died. So we worked together, and I helped introduce a bill with a Republican colleague because at the time I was a Democrat serving in the minority party in the Iowa House. So we worked together cooperatively to get the bill passed unanimously through the House and signed into law by Governor Branstad. And that was rare for somebody who was a Democrat to be a co-sponsor with your name to remain on the bill all the way through the legislature, all the way to the governor's desk. It almost never happens because they never want to give credit to somebody from the other party. But because of the nature of the bill, and because they knew that I was an honest person who was willing to follow through with my word, work hard, I was working on behalf of my constituent, and it was not about me getting my name in the paper, becoming more famous, or making money for myself. This is about helping people in my district. And so people knew that I was somebody that could be trusted and could work with to fix problems and solve issues that people had throughout our districts. I also received in 2016 the Gold Star Award from the Iowa Sheriffs and Deputies Association for leadership in the legislature on law enforcement and public safety issues. And now, as a prosecutor over the last 20 years, I have observed the struggles of children and their families up close. Sometimes the children have been victims of abuse or neglect, and others have suffered with substance abuse and mental health issues. And sometimes our courts and social service agencies can't meet the needs of children who are the most vulnerable citizens in our community. The huge health care cuts by Congress last summer in the budget bill will make it even more difficult for families to access the care and the treatment that they need to improve their lives, especially in rural communities. The Medicaid funding that was nearly $1 trillion, over 10% of the federal budget funding in that area will be cut. And I knew exactly who would be impacted most. Children, disabled individuals, people who are pregnant, and the elderly who are in nursing homes. And if we don't have funding to ensure payment for long-term care in nursing homes, will our nursing homes in small towns start to close as our schools have over the last 30 years? We need to do better by everybody, especially the most vulnerable citizens in our communities. Additionally, if Iowans continue to not receive quality education and don't have any real economic opportunities, and they don't feel treated fairly by those in government, then they have no hope for their future. I want to continue my public service and proven leadership and become a voice for those who have felt left behind by their government. We need to work to restore decency, ethics, and the rule of law in our democracy. It's time for a U.S. representative who cares more about the people than party politics, who cares more about their constituents than their corporate donors, and who wants to get things done for the district and not their donors. I want to be your next U.S. representative so I can have the opportunity to improve the lives of Iowans, and especially our children. My priorities include working to expand healthcare options and research, investing in rural communities, raising incomes and increasing competition, strengthening Social Security and Medicare, and protecting our rights and freedoms. Those are listed on my card, they're listed on my website. These are common sense goals that large majorities can agree on, that we can come together and actually solve problems for people in the district and not just play party politics. My campaign slogan is "Let's Grow Iowa Together." I truly believe we can have a stronger country if we work together to improve the lives of our fellow citizens. I want to work hard for all of my constituents, regardless of your party background, and I hope I can earn your support in the upcoming election. Now, I'd like to open up the town hall to your questions or your comments. Even if you don't have a question, I want to hear about your situation or what's going on here in your community so I can know more about Mills County and Glenwood and see how Congress could be doing a better job of improving the situation that you have going on in your local community. If I want to be a representative, I need to learn what your issues are, come forward, listen to you and your concerns, and become a public servant again and represent your interests, not mine. So please raise your hand, blurt out a question. Yes, go ahead.
This is like a personal
Sure.
thing for me because like I'm like the growth of AI and like the things we've seen with it. Those data centers are targeting little communities, and obviously like we haven't been targeted yet, but I'm like concerned just seeing its effects on the environment and with polluting the water, polluting the air, and we already have issues with water in Iowa and like unsafe drinking waters. So I just feel like these data centers are targeting these rural areas. So is there like what's your perspective on that?
Having employment and job opportunities is important in rural areas. Sometimes there's not enough places that stay open in small towns. So if there's opportunities for jobs, it's important. However, should we continue to give large data centers and out of state corporations tax breaks when they aren't contributing to the local economy? I don't know if that makes sense. Should we continue to give them rate cuts on their electricity so that everybody else rates go up because they use large amounts of electricity? Are we going to make sure that they comply with any water regulations to make sure that whatever waste is being dumped from their company is not polluting our streams and rivers and lakes in our community? Those things need to improve. That's why I support research. So I think research into AI and making sure that we have rules and regulations for people to follow is important, but we should also be researching what are the best practices to make sure that we don't continue to have poor water quality or poor air quality. So we have to address the cancer rate because Iowa's cancer rates continue to grow. So we need to make sure we are following the best science and the best evidence when we make decisions in Congress, and not just going with the partisan talking point of the day and just whatever your corporate donors want you to do. You need to focus on helping achieve real results that has a positive impact on your economy, so you can grow the rural economy again. And all these small towns aren't shrinking. So we need to do better. Was there another part of your question I didn't answer?
I was just more concerned about like the environmental impacts, but I also appreciate your perspective on like that it can be a good thing. I just want it to be more regulated because it's not regulated at all. And like, if I'm wrong, correct me. But I feel like there's an executive order recently signed that states aren't allowed to regulate AI, and that
The President Trump did issue an executive order. I don't know if it has much enforcement mechanisms in place. A lot of those executive orders do not. They're just a piece of paper. This is what the president wants to do, and it doesn't mean anything because it's not a law. But here, at this point in time, Congress needs to pass regulations. Myself as a prosecutor, I know AI has become an issue even in the cases we prosecute. There are state statutes involved of people altering children's photos and using AI to make them look nude or in other vulnerable positions, and those are crimes. And people need to make better decisions with the use of AI so that they're not using technology to criminalize or victimize individuals. But AI is here to stay. We just need to make sure that there are rules in place. We shouldn't have people using AI to write your term paper in school or at college. They shouldn't be writing my legal brief as an attorney in court. There need to be rules about what and when and how it's appropriate to use AI. Because if you're using AI to do legal research, AI is not infallible. You need to continue to have the skills to make sure you're doing the work yourself and not just relying on AI. So we have to have rules in place, and there should be regulations so it's the same because it's impacting all 50 states. It's not just a one state issue. There needs to be federal rules in place to address it. Other questions that people have?
They don't really employ very many people either.
Those data centers, they do not probably employ
mean,
large numbers of people,
right.
especially for the number of tax breaks they often get. So,
Well, and they take up huge parcels of land.
yep. And so what we need to do is figure out how do we continue to use, because we have a lot of technology and data centers support the use of technology. So if there are more cost effective ways to use less land to do that, I'm all for it. But we have to go where the research is that is most effective, and making sure that we're not shutting off opportunities for economic growth in our small towns as well.
Do you?
Cool.
Oh,
There's
sorry.
whoever wants to go
Go
first. One of
ahead.
you.
Well, this is more on the AI thing again. Have you read or are you aware of anything? The water use is for cooling. Okay. And I'd heard or read, actually, probably read it rather than heard, because I do a lot of reading, that I, I don't know, I don't know if it's China or if it's Japan where they've come up with a way to cool things without using so much water, or they recirculate the water within those cooling towers. Have you heard anything about that? Because to me, that would, if that's true, why aren't we borrowing from their technology?
And I don't know that answer. I have not heard about that specific issue with regards to China or Japan. So bringing it to my attention is a good thing, because now I've learned something new.
Well, and I got to go research again where I read that.
But yes, if there is better technology to use less water, to use less electricity, so that it's not causing shortages or any other problems for the local communities, that's important to know. And so there could be better technology than what's being used. And the issue is, are they just not using it because it costs too much, or are they just not using it because they don't care about the local community, because they're out-of-state companies that are coming in and just using our land to make progress, and then not really caring about being here and being good stewards of our environment in Iowa.
Okay.
So,
I just wondered if you had heard.
yes, Jill.
Mine was a follow-up on what you said, and I agree with you. There's so many times that we hear about Iowa letting after the fact that somebody comes in and gets other resources like water or whatever, and clean water. The natural resource management is a passion of mine as well. And you mentioned there needing to be research, and like what Amy said too, it's like we don't want to hear it after a town has to restrict their water or our cancer rate keeps going up. You know, somebody in your district, Caitlin Dre, just made an announcement today in front of the Iowa Senate, right, about a cancer diagnosis. And it's just, you know, I'm one of 3 kids, and two of my siblings that have grown up in this part of the state and have lost my sister, and my brother has cancer. So there's a lot of, I agree, knowing that they're going to do something before, and being a young person, she definitely doesn't want to like hear it, you know, down the road. We should have done.
But all of these businesses that we're bringing in, we want to make sure that we're vetting them to make sure that they are
Right.
using good practices that are
Right.
not harming our environment and leading to higher cancer rates. I
Right.
don't know what's causing all the cancer in Iowa.
Mm.
I have concerns that something that's going on in the water. Our nutrient reduction strategy that went into place in 2011 when Governor Branstad got reelected to his second stint in office has not been effective over the last 15 years in reducing the nitrates in our waterways. That just has not. So there needs to maybe be more federal intervention to make sure that the waterways in Iowa are cleaner, and that we have less pollution going on into our lakes, rivers, and streams. Because there is oftentimes we have throughout the summer areas in the state where things are closed down because the water quality is not adequate, and we shouldn't be doing that to the people. Nobody wants to have dangerous drinking water. You know, even farmers don't want to have dangerous drinking water. They want to be able to have clean drinking water. So we need to be making sure we're following the best practices and investing in research and making decisions based upon what's going to be most effective.
I think a lot of these things are, you feel it's imposed on you, like, who thought it was going to be that huge? That big plant there by Google. Every time you go by, it's bigger and bigger. Whoa, where did we ever see that? Did we even know that a lot of these things, it's like.
Do you know how many acres? Do you know how many
TRC,
acres it takes up?
God knows, it looks like all the way to here to
Council Bluffs.
Council Bluffs.
Yeah. It's like a city.
Every time, and also like the whole pipeline, whatever happened to that? You know, the eminent domain thing, whatever happened to that?
It's still pending.
Yeah, but really, these should not be political parties. Things should be everybody should want these things, and it's intentional, I think, to divide from others.
So with regards to the pipeline, I don't think we should be using eminent domain for private out-of-state corporations to come in and take land against the wishes of anybody. If farmers voluntarily want to do things, they've done that for years and years in Northwest Iowa with all of the windmills that we have all the way, and those have been voluntary easements. But that's up to the individual landowners to make those decisions. It shouldn't be forced upon them by state regulators or federal regulators or some out-of-state corporation that is not here to care about the after effects of what that CO2 pipeline may do if there are any accidents or spills that affect landowners or property owners after the fact. Is it going to be safe? We don't know all of those answers, but we shouldn't be forcing people to have to accept that on their own land. Are there other questions that people have? Yes.
I am very concerned about the post office. And earlier this year, I'll tell you a personal story.
Sure.
Earlier this year, I had to have an operation. I have had insurance with the National Letter Carriers Association for something like 40 or 50 years. My husband was a government employee. I also worked for the government, but I didn't retire from the government. And I got to thinking, I think Trump's going to do away with the post office if he can. My insurance is with them. So I went ahead and scheduled an operation in the spring instead of waiting until the fall. Well, in November, I got a notice that federal employees and their annuitants can no longer have insurance through the post office.
Hmm.
That's interesting.
And that was part of
because
your
that
husband's
means
retirement.
that I suspect millions of federal employees were suddenly thrown off of the Letter Carriers Association, which was the best insurance company you could imagine in 40, 50 years, never an issue. And now I'm kind of, the government is so short staffed now. I'm not 100% sure that I have the insurance that they said was the equivalent, but not run by the post office. So I am very concerned, especially in a state like Iowa, that the post office, I think, is one of the most important services I get from the government. The one thing that I want every day is to look at my mail. 90% of it is fundraising. Still, I think there's nothing like it. And I think a lot of people don't realize it's the most insured method of mailing things. Years ago, one of the great jewelers in the U.S. was sending something either to the Smithsonian or something, and they said the most secure way was the U.S. Post Office.
And
So,
I would be
because
opposed
of
to.
our community, I hope you would do whatever you could to look into the situations that affect the post office.
I would be opposed to closing the post office. Yes, it is a reliable source to make sure that we get our mail from one place to another. We mail packages and letters and other items that go every day, and it's reliable. I always complain about the cost of a stamp, but at least they have forever stamps. So if you aren't mailing stuff every week or every month, because people are mailing less than they used to, at least it stays, you have your book of stamps, it lasts that long to stay the same cost. But it is a reliable source of income. Have you been able to reach out to Representative Feenstra or Senator Grassley or Senator Ernst to see if you could help address this question about how your insurance has changed? Because they should be able to help you as a constituent that lives in Iowa with issues with that change in federal health insurance. That should be something, if the executive order affected that, they should be looking into figuring out why that is happening, because you would think it would take an act of Congress to change the law about who received ongoing benefits from your husband's pension. That would surprise me that they could unilaterally cut that off. So that's very unfortunate if that's the case. But I would encourage you to reach out and have other help. Is this your daughter's here?
And by the way,
No?
at 96,
Yeah.
it's not a good time to lose your insurance.
No, absolutely not. It's,
Need it for so long.
it's never a good time to lose your health insurance coverage. Never.
We did go to see Grassley.
You did?
At Council Bluffs at his office there.
Did they help you at
And we
all?
started a letter. Evidently, we were missing something, so we'll have to go into that all again. Something wasn't quite right. But we did go to that office building,
Okay.
which we didn't know existed. But anyway,
Try and reach out to your current congressperson.
we tried, so we have.
He's busy running for governor, but maybe he'll
They let you
respond.
in?
Grassley is ready for.
No,
No,
your
Feenstra.
Feenstra, your representative. So.
Oh.
Yeah,
Well, I have a little story about the post office.
Sure.
I got a questionnaire from the post office to fill out how you rated your post office as to mailing and all of this. Well, it was not a person I was talking to. It's pretty obvious. It was because I didn't go online. I made a phone call.
Okay.
So then they ask you, how's your post office service? 4 is good, 10 is this, blah, 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 blah. I was going along good, and it came to media mail. So they asked something about books and something like that. And I said, I don't, I couldn't understand what she said. So I just hit something, and they said, wrong answer, end of, that was it. I could not get back on to answer any more questions. Now, to me, if you want to really have a poll that makes sense, you would have a person on that line.
A live person instead of
Right,
just
because she could have said, "Oh, you didn't understand that," or I could have said to her, "I didn't understand that. Can you repeat it?" But the minute I put in something, it was end of questionnaire.
Yep, there's lots of people's voicemails set up that are just auto recordings. It's an AI voice, and then they whatever you say, it prompts them to do
That's it.
something else. But if they hear you wrong, they'll send you to the wrong place. So
Yeah.
that's if the government is trying to get away with not providing enough services by firing people, that was my concern. Unilaterally
mine
firing
too.
people, especially people covered by union contracts who shouldn't be fired without cause, it's very concerning to me. But you're making the government work less well if you don't have enough people funded and staffed into positions. People at the Social Security office, if you're trying to access death benefits or
Right.
survivors benefits for children, there's lots of people. If you don't have enough people working to do the job, people are cut off. My wife's cousin is intellectually disabled. She lives with her stepmother in Nebraska, and my wife is the current caretaker. She's the temporary guardian and power of attorney for the mother because she's in her 80s and has Alzheimer's, and so her daughter, who's in her 40s, is intellectually disabled and lives with her stepmother because the father got remarried. But he recently died, the uncle, and so they've been struggling to try and set up paperwork for a guardianship for the last month, and they have to serve notice to the aunt who's at a nursing facility in South Sioux City, and they're running out of the funds to help fund and support her because she's on Social Security, disability income, and so it's been again, he's the payee, and so he's passed, and they didn't have this set up, and people didn't know that this would be such an emergency. It was an unexpected passing, and so, but if people are not there in these types of offices to help you transition and get things set up, you have struggles, real struggles.
Well, and it can't just be anybody. It can't just be a body
You're right.
at the desk. It has to
They
be
would have to have
people
some knowledge.
with a knowledge base.
Right.
And if you across the board fire people, you lose that knowledge base.
Especially if you're firing the most senior people, the people that have
Yeah.
higher salaries and have the most experience and knowledge, you're losing years and decades of experience. So that's it's been unfortunate that over the last year that's what we've seen in a lot of places.
I think, as anybody in politics, I think there's an enormous amount of prejudice now in society for people that don't have Wi-Fi, that don't have internet, that don't have a credit card, that can't see and can't hear. And if you don't have these things, too bad. Where's the only free computer in Glenwood?
The library.
If you don't have a credit card, how are you gonna? And everything is now focused on only people with those skills. And I think it's really, if even as a politician, if one can continue to push to not have that happen, because we're cutting off big portions of people who don't have a lot of vote. If you're poor and you're old, you don't already have a lot of clout. And here again, even less, because if you don't have Wi-Fi, you don't have internet, too bad.
Yeah, they should not be cutting people off just because of their status of their
And there's
having
a lot of
Wi-Fi
people, you have
or
to do it by
computers.
the
Yep.
internet side. You can't do it by telephone. And these are government services that you can't get.
Yes.
I appreciate that you push really heavily for like protecting children and focusing on that aspect of mental health and all that because that's obviously very underrepresented. I'm just wondering if you're also going to push for like prenatal care and funding like women's organizations and making sure that women have access to bodily autonomy and just ensuring that before the kid is born, the person was also protected and not in like I mean the mother. Like sorry, it's confusing, but
Yes, so I support restoring cuts to Medicaid. That is sometimes the primary source of health insurance for women who are pregnant. And so I think that funding should be restored across the board. Doesn't matter whether you're a child or an adult or whatever it is. So if you qualify, you should be able to do that. But what I really want to do if I get to Congress is to pass the public option. It passed the US House in 2009, didn't pass the US Senate. But the public option would allow you to have health care whether or not you change jobs or move states or temporarily lost your job. You can keep it with you at all times. But it wouldn't be a mandate that you'd be forced into a single payer system. It would be your choice. You could keep your private insurance if you want it. There's a lot of union members, including people like me, who have bargained away increase in wages to have great health insurance coverage. And if they like that, they should be able to keep it. Like you like the one from the postal employees, you should be able to keep that if that's the system that you like and you want. But there should be that public option available for everybody else in the middle. So it's not just the Medicare and the Medicaid at the beginning of life and the end of life. It covers everybody throughout the entire stage of life, so that we would have a right to health care. And so that's what I want to do so that people can always access that. Does that answer your question?
I just feel like there's been a lot of cuts to like women's healthcare, targeting women specifically. So that's like a bigger concern.
Yes, there have been many closures of OB/GYN clinics throughout the state, and that has a lot to do with people are losing health insurance coverage currently because they've cut off the Medicaid funding, and they're going to be over the next 2 years as it's implemented. They're also not renewing their insurance policies because private insurance rates continue to go up. And a lot of that has to do with the failure to fund the premium subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. So in the short term, the Medicaid funding restored, the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act need restored. Because in Iowa, there are 25,000 people, many of them farmers and small business owners, who are directly impacted by those cuts, the loss of the Affordable Care Act subsidies. And their premiums are projected to go up on average over 93%, so almost doubling. And most people can't afford it, so they're losing their healthcare coverage, which then leads to delayed care. Because if you are putting off things that, like if you caught it earlier, like Caitlin Dre today had good healthcare coverage, so she caught her ovarian cancer early, and hopefully she'll be able to get treatment. And she's a good friend of mine and my current state senator. So I was very surprised when I heard that today. I reached out to her and wished her well, and I hope that she continues on the road to recovery and send her my prayers. So, but we need people to have access to care, regardless of your background, whether you're pregnant or not pregnant. So we need to do better for our healthcare system. That's another reason I think we need better representation, because over the last 10 years since Donald Trump has been running for president, where is his healthcare plan that was going to bring down costs, make it more affordable, and make it more universally available? Where is it? He's been running for president for 10 years.
He had a concept.
Where is it?
He had
It's
a
an
concept.
idea, a plan.
Concept.
A plan.
There was a bill passed in the House. It's already there. We could just go back and pass that bill. And if we had done it, 17 years ago, costs could be much lower. More people would be covered. Less people would be at risk of dying or having serious health conditions if they had access to care earlier.
And I don't know if she's talking about, when she says bodily autonomy, a woman's right to choose.
Yeah.
They rolled
that's
back
true.
Roe v. Wade, and we never thought that was going to happen, right?
Mm.
Well, it did. But there are a lot of reasons women choose to end a pregnancy. It's not a method of convenient birth control, like they like to tell you. That's a bunch of BS, and we all know that. Usually, it's a very difficult decision that a woman has to make. Usually, with her partner, I hope. Not always, but at least she and her doctor ought to be the ones making that decision, not the government. And I wish they could get that changed.
Yes, as an attorney, overturning 50 years worth of precedents is a huge disruption to how a system works and how a country works. Overturning Roe versus Wade was a mistake. Putting it up to each of the individual states, how healthcare is provided is a mistake. My wife and I, she suffered 2 miscarriages. She had to have a medical procedure to terminate one pregnancy because there was no heartbeat, and she had to have a pill procedure to terminate another pregnancy because there was no heartbeat. And so those are very personal decisions that should be made personally, by the woman.
Yeah.
Hopefully in consultation with the doctor and doing what's best to help her. But under some of the laws that have been passed in the states since Roe versus Wade has been overturned, both of those procedures would have been illegal because she would have had to carry a child to term that had no heartbeat at 10 weeks.
So it was not viable.
It was not viable. There was like the heartbeat bill in Iowa. So like there was maybe a heartbeat at 6 weeks. I don't know, but when we checked at 10 weeks, there was not a heartbeat twice. And so those miscarriages are very personal to me. And we need to do better to make sure we have access to care for everybody who's in those difficult situations.
Can I just say something? It's so wonderful to see you guys here. You're so articulate. What is the thing that you would like most to have
If,
him
if you're
say when he gets to DC?
if you're both just 17 or 18, you are definitely the two youngest people that have been to any of my town halls. This is my 8th county, so thank you. Thank you. We need more young people to get involved in educating themselves and getting out there and voting. So I appreciate you guys coming. We have about looks like 15 more minutes. We have the room till 6:30, so I have more time for questions. But if you feel like you need to leave, it's okay if you leave. I'd be glad to take one-on-one questions if nobody else had any direct questions that they wanted to open up. Yes, great. It's good.
Obviously, there's been a lot of concerns with immigration policies, and it feels very clouded with, like, obviously there's a lot of propaganda like going around, and people are altering videos, but there's a lot of funding into what I view as corrupted organizations, and I just feel like there's not regulations there, and there's not really an effective plan to like control immigration, and obviously you have background with like persecuting criminals and sex offenders, and no one's advocating for drug dealers or criminals and sex offenders to come into the country illegally, but I just feel like there's a real lack of like empathy and like seeing, like, we're just viewing, it's like excusing an excuse for racism almost, I feel like, to target these people and view them as less than because of their ethnicity.
Right. Unless anybody's Native American here, I think we're all families of immigrants. My great grandfather came to Iowa from Ireland and settled in Grand Meadow Township in Cherokee County, and then my grandfather farmed there as well. So I'm an immigrant family. Did anybody check his papers when he came in the late 1800s to make sure that all the documents were in order? Did they check his background or his criminal history? I don't know. He was from Ireland. That's about all I know about my great grandfather. But we shouldn't be enforcing any laws on the basis of race, national origin, or religion. And right now, I think we are violating the Constitution oftentimes because we are engaging in overreach to violate people's First Amendment rights by not allowing peaceful protests, violating the Fourth Amendment by going into people's houses without a judicial warrant. They are talking about they violated Second Amendment rights. He was lawfully a gun owner who was carrying a firearm with a concealed carry permit, and he was attacked and shot because he was recording people. I don't know the details. A full investigation of all of these deaths need to be happening. As a prosecutor, I'm somebody who relies on evidence, and I wasn't there to see what happened. I don't know the full details, but from what I've seen, it's a tragedy that should not have happened. We need to have the temperature cool down on immigration. Of course, people who have violated the law and are sex offenders or drug dealers or have come in here to do harm to our country should not be able to stay here. I'm a prosecutor. I've had felons convicted over the years that I've had to call Immigrations and Custom Enforcement because they were subject to deportation. You have to follow the law. But randomly rounding up children and zip tying them, pulling people who are U.S. citizens because of the color of their skin out, arresting Native Americans. Frequently, Native Americans have been arrested just because they suspect them of being from another country. That is crazy to me that this is what our country has come to over the last year. We are better than that in America. We are a melting pot. We are people from all walks of life coming together from all different countries, all religious backgrounds. And we're here to work together, not to divide each other up and make scapegoats out of problems that are not created by them.
Legally, what is it? If you were here illegally, what is the? Or you can't really be like criminal. It's a misdemeanor, right?
So
So
there,
what is the legal
it depends. Some people are here and are refugees or work visas or student visas, and they have entered the country lawfully.
Lawfully.
They sometimes stay past the authorization. That is not a crime. What is a crime is like if you have been removed from the country and then you come back in, then it's a felony. So you have committed a felony to re-enter the country after you have been removed from the country. Other people who have come with no paperwork, that is the misdemeanor. It is a civil violation, something more in the kin of reckless driving is what it is. So it's subject to prosecution, and it also makes you subject to deportation. But you have not yet been deported, so you're not in the status of other people. So the immigration law is very complicated. But right now, a lot of what's happening is people with legal status are being unilaterally revoked. People who are being sent out of the country who are refugees or who have student visas, and they don't like what you've said as a student, and so they're revoking your status based upon the country you're from, your religious background, or who you spoke out against. And so that is totally in violation of the First Amendment. Because if you have legal status in the country and entered illegally, even if you're not a US citizen, all of the constitutional rights apply. The First Amendment, the right to due process, the right to have a hearing before you are subject to deportation. So all of these rights are being trampled by unilaterally just rounding up anybody based upon their looks. And I'm very concerned that this is going to continue until we have Congress stand up and say no. And so I'm not in Congress. I can't do anything about it right now. But you can contact your congressperson now and say, don't continue to support funding for immigration
A
enforcement
lot of good that'll do you.
in the way that it's going on.
Still gotta do it.
I'm
I
hopeful
have.
people will start listening to the concerns of the country. And after these last two shootings in Minneapolis, they're just tragedies that shouldn't have happened if they were not enforcing laws in the way in which they're enforcing laws. I don't know the full facts. I don't know the outcome. I don't know what's going to happen up there. But to have U.S. citizens shot by law enforcement authorities while you're just observing and concerned about what's happening, that to me is something's going wrong. Something's going wrong. We need to change directions.
What is the legal implications for somebody who's hiring illegal, undocumented workers? Are they subject to any kind of fines or not? Because they never seem to be attacked, the people that are knowingly hiring people.
Yes, employers who knowingly hire somebody without work authorization are subject to civil penalties. There's not much criminal action that goes on. It's usually civil penalties. And so, but that requires enforcement actions by the federal government to take action against those companies. And so most companies are using employment agencies to hire. And so they're saying, I don't know, they did the check. That's what happened with the Des Moines school board. They used somebody else to do the background check instead of using E-Verify. Governor Reynolds is now mandating E-Verify for all state hires, but that doesn't require it at schools or locally or at all any other businesses. So there are lots of things that could be done differently, but there are no enforcement actions generally against most corporations because it's very difficult to prove that they knew.
So is it easier for that company just to pay the fine and go on?
I don't know if the fines are big enough. I don't know the exact. I know some immigration law. I don't know enough about employment immigration law to give you a good answer on that. Yes.
Every time I get hired for a job, I have to submit a social security number. So how is that happening? Is that where the criminality is?
Yes, and so that's what happened with the superintendent of schools for the Des Moines School District. He filled out his work authorization for working for the school district, and he used a social security card. And he may have had a social security number at one point in time because he had a work visa, but it had expired, and then he was subject to a deportation order, and so no longer had permission to work. So he also signed paperwork when you sign and say I'm authorized to work in the United States or I'm a U.S. citizen, which when you check the box, that is a form of forgery under state law, and then under federal law, it's a separate felon crime because you're lying under oath or affidavit about the status of your employment, and so those are crimes when you lie about your status.
Do you have, just as someone that's going to college and like seeing the real costs of it, do you have concerns about access to education, especially for children, and like the lack of funding for public schools, and then also that transition into college and being and like providing opportunities for people to be able to afford to go to college and get a secondary education and like expand their career options?
I've always been concerned about public education funding. The feds do not do much by way of federal education funding. The most that they do with regards to local schools is helping fund enforcement of disability laws and making sure that people who have disabilities or mental health issues can get services that they need to make sure they have access to education. So federally, there's not a big role for us. But with regards to higher education, I support making community colleges more affordable. It should be something that people, if you don't want to go on and get a 4-year degree, there should be job funding or education funding available for skilled workforce needs. So if we have skills that are needed in this community, if we have every plumber in the county that is retired, you should be able to go get a plumbing education paid for through government funding that is made easier for people who actually can get the skills that they need. Higher education, it goes up every year. I can't believe how much it's going to be for my stepson to go to college next year. It's crazy. And so, since I've had a successful career as an attorney, we don't qualify for a lot of loans and things like that. But it's something that we need to make sure that we're making school more affordable. I was concerned that the Trump administration eliminated some of the terms of what a profession was, so that people who have higher education degrees in social work and other fields that impact nursing and other educators who have master's degree, they are going to have a harder time getting loans for higher education. And we shouldn't be making it harder to get loans to make sure that we have people in this profession, because that seemed again to be picking on people, predominantly women, because a disproportionate number of women go into those careers and professions currently. There's nothing wrong with men going into those careers as well, but we shouldn't be making it more difficult to get access to education funding, for sure. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Good.
Where do you stand on funding ICE in the Department of Homeland Security?
I'm concerned with our current head of the Department of Homeland Security. I think if we had somebody else with actual experience in immigration enforcement, or actually something different than her experience has been, we might be doing things differently. So that's my concern, is that the direction of the agency has shifted dramatically based upon who's at the head. But that was a decision that was made by the president to put that person there. So my concern is the direction. There needs to be law enforcement funding for Homeland Security to make sure that we are staying safe. Luckily, we have not had a major terrorist attack in the country in almost 25 years, but there have been other attempts over the years. So we have to have funding for Homeland Security. We have to have funding for immigration enforcement. They reorganized that organization in 2001 after 9/11 to make it a different functional, which focused more on enforcement. But did we have these same issues with ICE a year ago when we had somebody else that was not the president?
Well, and,
So it's we should be
and funding it,
we should be blaming an agency when it's the head that has made the decisions. And my other concern is rapidly hiring a lot of new people at ICE. Did they have adequate training or experience to do the job, or are they just taking anybody in off the street who has no experience in law enforcement? I work with law enforcement on a regular basis for almost 24 years now, and um, law enforcement officers want to do what's right. They want to follow the Constitution. They want to enforce the laws. They want to do things correctly. But if the people at the head are giving you carte blanche to do things not according to proper procedures, because you haven't been trained and don't know what those proper procedures are, things are going to happen, more likely to have incidences that are negatively impacting the community. It's always tragic when there's a law enforcement shooting, no matter where it happens, but we have to have policies and procedures in place and checks and balances to make sure that law enforcement, wherever they are following the proper procedures and not escalating. We have to have more, training to make sure that people know how to de-escalate situations. They've always been talking about that over the last many years, because oftentimes law enforcement officers encounter people in mental health crisis because they don't have access to the mental health services that they need. And if they don't know how to de-escalate, those situations can turn tragic quickly. So we need better law enforcement training. So I don't know if cutting funding will make the changes if you still have the people at the top making the decisions.
They gave them a huge increase though.
well, and it appears to me when I read through the list of what got cut and what got bumped, a lot of that money came from doing away with SNAP, Medicare, Medicaid cuts. Um, eh,
Yeah, the original budget bill.
the caring portion of the legislation that dealt with agencies that care for American people got slashed, and DHS and ICE specifically was given a huge increase.
Right. And so was all of that increase necessary? Probably not.
Well, and all of our Iowa legislators voted for it.
And on the other side, were all of those cuts necessary? Probably not. But they were trying to, instead of adding $4.6 trillion to the national debt, they only wanted to add 3.6. So when
Right.
they passed a budget bill, they intentionally added $3.6 trillion to the national debt. So I don't know how the Republican Party can claim that they're the party of fiscal responsibility when they're adding to the national debt at a faster rate than any previous Democratic president in history has ever done, at the expense of cutting programs for the poorest people in our country. So we need to do different things to make things a bigger priority in our country. And if your priority is trying to help people have a baseline of food and have a baseline of care and support and health care, you should be supporting candidates who actually care about the people who live in their district.
I just want to say, we should be careful about saying those ice guys don't know what they're doing, because that guy that shot Mr. Ross is 10 years.
Was he? I had not
Yeah.
heard that.
And he was a gun expert. That's what's scary. It's not that they're like just some cowboy. Some of those people should, in theory, know what they're doing.
And no,
And
they
so,
weren't gonna do
yeah.
any investigation. That's what's concerning. They get out there, they spew out a story that's not true, and then they're not gonna allow an investigation. Any cop in Omaha that shoots someone is on desk duty immediately
Oh.
until they've done an investigation.
Yes, and if there's a local law enforcement shooting by either the police department or the sheriff's office, they bring in the state Department of Criminal Investigation. So it's an outside agency to look at the evidence, and so it should not be an internal investigation. There should absolutely be an independent investigation by law enforcement that has experience in investigating these to get to the bottom. Because there are multiple camera angles on every incident you have, because everybody has a camera out these days recording what's going on. But thank God there are people out recording things, or otherwise we wouldn't know what had actually happened. So I'm hopeful that we'll have good investigations and find out more. Well,
But they're not worried about it in situations where they know they're being filmed. What is frightening is we don't know what situations are like when we are not being filmed.
Right.
We don't know what they're doing. And how legally can they have no accountability? I don't understand that.
I'm very concerned that we are not
What's
getting the truth of the matter on a lot of issues. We need to have people in governments to be honest with us. We shouldn't have Congress people sending out emails that falsely claim that Democrats are trying to give free health care to illegal immigrants, because that's not true. But I received that same email multiple times from my current congressman,
Yes.
even though it's not true.
Yeah.
So we should have people in government stand up and speak the truth, and speak to the truth to the president. So if there's something that the Republican Party knows that is wrong, they should stand up and say, this is wrong. We are living in a time that is not normal. We don't normally have presidents doing what they're doing. Why do we have presidents invading Venezuela, threatening to invade Greenland, and taking actions unilaterally without any consultation with Congress?
And you can't remember.
If somebody from the Israeli or the Iranian Guard snuck into Israel in the middle of the night and kidnapped Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife, do you think somebody would have called that an act of war?
Oh.
I think we need to think about how our actions impact the rest of the world, and how our standing in the world is diminished by not working cooperatively and not even consulting Congress. There's
Congress doesn't do anything.
I was not
They
in favor of our invasion of Iraq in 2003. I was not. But at least Congress had voted to authorize the military use of force in 2002, so that the president had the authority lawfully to do something like that. Right now, there's been nothing even debated about whether or not we should continue to take action in these countries. And the limited resolution in the Senate didn't pass. So. Oh, yes.
Assuming that we can bring up issues that we don't know much about. I have about 4 issues. I'm just going to mention them to you.
Sure. We'll have to go quick. We're running out of time.
I heard a couple nights ago on the BBC something that totally shocked me about what's going on in Minneapolis. The American Indians tribes that are in Minnesota don't carry the same kind of information about themselves, and these people are being picked up, and there are tribes there that are trying to find out what happened to their young men. And they were
Each of the
shocked
500
that
tribes
the
in the
tribal
U.S.
society
have their
is
own.
like a family.
They have their own
I
system.
know you. I may not know your last name. Everyone in town knows me. And they don't carry the same kind of documentation. And these people are being picked up because they can't show, and these people are trying to find this. So I think when laws are passed, it should be obligatory for at least someone working on that to say, does it affect American Indians? The second is, I think we should explore the idea of presenting to children the idea that going to school is their work and they should be paid an annual fee for completing, not based on whether you're smart or dumb, but you went to school and every year you get $1,000 or whatever, because we depend on children learning at school. And I've had a little experiment myself with a 6-year-old, and I have a contract with him, and he works for me, and I pay him, and he's learned about banking. So I think the idea that children are working, if we don't, if they're not in a situation that when they graduate, they have enough money to either go to trade school or college, I think that's a scandal in our society. So let's say if you could complete first grade, the government puts $1,000 in the bank account, it would help local banking, whatever. The second issue is, I don't know much about foster care, but my thought, and I could be totally wrong, is that usually you get out of that when you're about 18.
Age out.
And anybody that's raised children know it's hard to throw them out at 18, and I think it should be required to be.
Yeah.
Didn't get thrown out.
And so I think we should look into subsidizing them until they're 21.
There
I
is,
just can't imagine
there
being
is-
thrown out in our current society at 18.
and since I work in that area, I can answer that one because
It's terrible.
the foster care system
And,
is complicated, but
The
you know,
other thing that
He's
I think,
I was going to answer your question.
The
I'll give you one more second though, but if you are 18 years old and in foster care in Iowa, the current law allows you to sign voluntarily in to stay in foster care until you've successfully graduated high school. So you can stay in, and the foster parent continues to receive support and help to pay for your placement until you graduated high school. Also, there are other programs. If you're not in a foster home, it's called supervised apartment living. So if you age out in a program that has a supportive worker that visits you on a monthly basis, if you're age 17 and older, you can age out and you receive supportive services till age 21 in the state of Iowa. There was a federal law change in 20 Donald Trump's first term, 2018, I believe, is when it went into effect. That it allowed that extended stay for people who are to prevent homelessness. That was the goal, is to prevent homelessness with youth. So there are programs out there that are better than what you may have had experience with. So what was your final and fourth point? I want to make sure I heard your last point.
the last one was, let's explore the idea that there is no sexism in public education. Let's get rid of this idea of can girls play basketball, just whatever you want to sign up for. We shouldn't create the idea that some things boys are good at and some things girls are good at. I think we should say, you've got a team. Maybe somebody's going to be faster than anybody else. They happen to be a woman. But I think we should explore the idea of, can we reward schools that start that idea that sports is not necessarily at that level have to be based on sex.
And
Because
there is
I might like to learn something about baseball. I might like to learn something about
Sure.
football.
and there's Title IX right now since 1972 that requires equality with regards to sports funding at the local level at colleges. So there is programs in place. I don't know if it's working well right now, but we definitely need to continue to explore that. So anybody else with one final thought before we go? Otherwise, I think our time is up.
I just want to say I really appreciate your like knowledge of the Constitution and your like advocacy for it, because like obviously what we found this country on, and like I just love like understanding what the amendments are saying and like, because it's really refreshing just because I've seen all this news and it's like that's obviously a violation of the Constitution and no one's doing anything about it. So I just appreciate that, and then also like your advocacy for like separation of powers and making sure that things are balanced, and just thank you.
I appreciate it. Because as somebody who has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, both as a prosecutor and as a former state legislator, I take that very seriously. And it's important that if you're actually going to go work in Congress, you understand how the Constitution is supposed to work, so that you're not coming up with crazy ideas that are unconstitutional. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
Do you have a function?